Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where for hours now, hashtag GiveCaptainAmericaABoyfriend has been trending on Twitter. And this is just 2 weeks after Give Elsa a Girlfriend was trending on Twitter. And I think that the overall takeaway here is that Disney is hardcore LGBT baiting that community. And I think even more so actually with Captain America than with Elsa. But I don't know how much longer they can get away with it, because now they find themselves in like this gray zone, I think, where everybody is potentially unhappy, where you have the LGBT community saying like, why won't you just admit what's so obvious? And then you have people who do not want to see the characters go in that direction start to wonder, well, is the character going in that direction? And unfortunately, some of them, question, whether or not they still like that character. It's difficult. I think that the uncertainty of it is potentially becoming problematic for the brands, so to speak. Now, I had some pretty strong feelings about the Elsa situation because, that's a whole conversation about, are single women, de facto, should they be interpreted as lesbians, right? If you're not in a romantic relationship, or if you have if you want to be a queen and you have aggressive qualities, or, you walk your own path, are those lesbian qualities? Are those, to some degree, masculine qualities? It's a difficult conversation. But I think the Captain America one is a lot more clear cut, because when you inject that subtext into Captain America Civil War, his dedication to Bucky makes a lot more sense, right? I think a number of us were just, getting that feeling off watching the movie without anyone creating this hashtag. And, some people commented on the fact that they had Steve Rogers kiss Sharon Carter in a very forced sequence, almost to be like, well, no, yeah, he's really dedicated to Bucky, and he'll do anything for Bucky at the expense of anyone else. He doesn't care. He didn't even do that kind of stuff for Peggy, right? With Peggy, he was you knew Peggy was sick, right? And he wasn't visiting her that often. I don't know. Someone sent me a really funny meme about the people in Captain America's life, and it was best girl was Peggy, best friend was Black Widow, and then something about Sharon Carter, best coworker, and then Bay was Bucky, right? And so I think that they tried to dispel that idea with that kiss, but I think it just actually reinforced the idea because it was so forced, and it just came out of nowhere. They flirted a little bit, but his dedication to Bucky, I think it does seem romantic. So I think that, Disney just has to be careful as to, I think they can't have their cake and eat it too. They can't be like, well, we really want to appeal to the LGBT community, whose support for Disney, by the way, is legendary. They're really crucial to the success, I think, of Disney in social media and, the hardcore fandom. But then wanting to, maybe not have that conversation with maybe some of the more conservative groups that support Disney. But I think with Captain America, they went a step too far, where it just, it really is like, how can you not address it? And I think that to some degree, they just kind of put Captain America in the closet, and you're seeing the LGBT community say, come on, come out. It's just so obvious. But I'm curious, how do you guys feel? I think, you have to take every character individually. It's the same for when you change a character's ethnicity, right? And I think with Captain America, I think that they've done such a strong job of establishing I don't want to see, it's tough for me. I don't want to see Elsa. I don't want to see Elsa have a girlfriend, because I feel very strongly about what she's supposed to stand for in terms of individuality. But I think that at this point, Bucky so defines who Captain America is in the movies that, it seems to me like they've already gone there, right? And also, I think it would be just like with Poe Dameron, a great example of someone who happens to be gay, and it doesn't define who he is as a person. Although in Civil War, it kind of does, because that's his whole impetus in the film for what he's doing. But for instance, this is a spoiler, by the way, so if you haven't seen Captain America Civil War for some reason, you can skip ahead to the next story via the chapter times down below in the video description. Okay, still here? It always really surprised me at the end of Captain America Civil War that while I understood Steve wanting to keep Tony from killing Bucky, he wasn't trying to apprehend Bucky either. He was telling Bucky to make a run for it. Like, I don't want to see you imprisoned, Bucky. And I just, I guess not on my terms. And I just thought that was odd. I was like, he wasn't like, Tony, we're going to bring him in, but I don't want a death on your hands, right? Like, Bucky has to live with this. It's so hard for him. Don't make yourself another Bucky. Like, that could have been a very easy way that the conversation went, but it was just so incredibly emotional that that element just seems to be lurking there. So I think that Captain America or Poe Dameron are both really great choices to, I think, move gay characters in the direction that I think not only people want to see them go in, but that they kind of really need to go in to, like, kind of remove the stereotypes of those conversations and the way people perceive gay characters in entertainment. All right, so anyway, that's the first story of the day. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on it. And let's move over to an interesting horror story. I rarely cover horror movie news because horror is kind of like a factory these days, right? I mean, you get the movies out, you release them like in January, February, or October, and they're hit or miss. It's like almost like the horror producers themselves have no idea what's going to work, unless James Wan is directing. And we're going to talk about him momentarily. But the big headline is that John Carpenter wants to do another Halloween movie. God damn it! But this time he's going to partner up with Jason Blum, the top horror person working in Hollywood today, to make said film. And John Carpenter will be an executive producer, so it sounds like Jason Blum, to some degree, will take control creatively. Now, the first Halloween was one of the first really famous horror movies that ever came out, and it's also responsible for making Jamie Lee Curtis a household name, besides being Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh's daughter. But anyway, Halloween also, set a lot of the rules for the genre, right? That, Scream later would, very smartly play upon. So it's really Halloween and Friday the 13th were the really big horror movies, right? That everybody paid a lot of attention to back in the day. So Friday the 13th, and interestingly enough, as horror continues to be a popular genre, and actually had a little bit of a renaissance lately, they've tried to bring back Halloween and Friday the 13th, and it really hasn't worked out. The Halloween movies, they make solid money, especially because they're inexpensive to produce, but they're not James Wan's The Conjuring. They're not Annabelle, right? They're not Insidious. Those movies are huge hits. Now, what's interesting to me is that a lot of the horror movies that do well today have a high concept element to them. Like, think of the Purge films. That's what they noted in the article covering this. That's Jason Blum's most successful franchise at the moment. Of course, he's also behind Paranormal Activity, but that's really Oren Peli's thing. That helped Jason Blum get a lot of clout in Hollywood, but I think that his auteur horror films are more his calling card. But The Purge Anarchy is a really smart, high-concept horror film. So it's interesting to see maybe go back to basics with Halloween, because that's like a crazed, escaped mental patient terrorizes a babysitter and her high school friends, right? That's like super old school. So the only way I can see this working with today's audience and not going the Scream route of commenting on that and being meta is to have a really strong artistic element to it, almost like It Follows, which got a lot of people's attention because it was just so masterfully made. So, and that plays into James Wan, who's having the most success in the genre at the moment, and he, interestingly enough, is very old school in his scares. He's not particularly gory, even though he got his start with Saw. But James Wan, very old school scares, takes his time, very good storytelling, but he really, I think, is very good at his craft, which is one of the reasons I think he's been so successful at crossing over to other genres, whereas other horror directors don't always, Wes Craven never was able to make the jump, but he was never the artist that James Wan has been. Not to say that Wes Craven isn't very good at what he does, but he wasn't a James Wan. It's important for filmmakers and everyone to realize their strengths and their limitations. So anyway, I would think that if they could make Halloween like an old school babysitter, mental patient horror movie, but they really went to town with the cinematography and really good writing and great use of a soundtrack, it could be something really interesting maybe. So we'll see what happens. This is a very interesting thing for Jason Blum to prove himself, to see if he can take this brand and make it successful again, or if it just seemed like another cookie cutter attempt by Hollywood to cash in on a brand. That's kind of like the big question to Hollywood overall these days, right? Are you going to do like something legitimately good or just try and cash in on a brand, right? I think ideally it's somewhere in the middle. All right, so anyway, that's the second story of the day. Now, speaking of brands, one of the strongest obviously right now is Marvel, right? And so a lot of people, Marvel is actually so successful now that you're seeing a real push by the people in their TV shows to get the call up to go to the movies, right? They're like, you said this was connected, your movies are doing so well, I'm starting to feel like I'm stuck on the bench and, I'm not part of the team. And, you saw Chloe Bennett make some really negative remarks on that point, which I think she shouldn't have done. But anyway, there's been a lot of talk and rumors that the Marvel Netflix shows are going to tie into Spider-Man Homecoming. This is something that I, even suggested before the rumors came out because it just is such a natural fit. Like Captain America and Bucky and the Winter Soldier as a couple seems pretty obvious. Spider-Man and the Netflix Marvel shows working together also seems very obvious because they occupy the same space. Spider-Man is largely a local hero and Hell's Kitchen is part of his beat. So how can you not have a crossover? Also, Spider-Man is so heavily involved in those comic book stories as well. The Kingpin is a villain for him in addition, and that's who we're talking about today, the Kingpin. And there's been rumors so far that they'll be name dropped in Spider-Man Homecoming, the Marvel Netflix shows, but there was also some discussion that maybe Vincent D'Onofrio would show up. Now, Vincent D'Onofrio tweeted on this the other day, and he said, "It's news to me, guys. I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be great if it did." And then he also followed up with, "But tell Marvel if you want it to happen so that maybe it will." And I would just say to Marvel, if anybody, talk to anyone who watched Daredevil Season 2, and if you haven't watched Daredevil Season 2, again, you might want to skip ahead, but what's taking you so long? Okay, but if you're still here, I think that everybody can attest to the fact that Vincent D'Onofrio did so much for the show, the Seasons 2, when he showed up. Right? Like when he came back and joined the story, you were like, this just got so much better. And I think that he would be I think that even if he just had one scene, I think it would do a lot to excite fans in the movie. Maybe he has one, and they're trying to throw us off the track so we don't know about it. I mean, they could probably sneak it in if they filmed it while they were filming something like make it seem like Kingpin's going to show up on one of the Marvel Netflix shows they're shooting at the moment, but actually he's filming a Spider-Man cameo. But, his character is not only so good and so has such a history with Spider-Man anyway, especially in the Ultimate Spider-Man comic, but also Vincent D'Onofrio is already a movie actor. I mean, he's done a lot of television, but he was in Jurassic World, so I don't think that it would be too jarring for audiences to see him in a movie, right? They wouldn't be like, oh, how'd that TV actor get in here? They'd be like, oh, that's the guy from Jurassic World. And if they're watching the Marvel Netflix shows, they're like, it's the best Kingpin ever. I mean, Vincent D'Onofrio's performance is so stellar as that character that I think he is movie level. And I think that if they want people to work on their television shows, they need to honor that work with the possibility they could get called up to the big leagues. Although on a side note, I don't know why they put Alfre Woodard in Captain America Civil War when she's going to play Black Mariah in Luke Cage, unless she's so devastated by what Tony Stark and the Avengers did to her son she becomes Black Mariah. I don't know. Maybe that's the big surprise, but that seemed like an odd mistake for Marvel to make. All right, so those are the three stories of the day. Now let's get on to the viewer question, which is from Elsie Clark. And Elsie says, Grace, I have a question. Love the channel, and I have just, thank you, Elsie, and I have just seen the new Beauty and the Beast trailer. And whilst, I love that you used whilst, and whilst I am excited for that film, how many more remakes of their old films do you think Disney can do before people get bored? I think most audiences are already a bit fed up with remakes, but with Mulan and even a possible Dumbo remake in development, do you think Disney should be channeling more money into making original animation rather than dull remakes? Thanks for answering and have a nice day. Smiley face. Well, see, first off, I'd like to point out that Disney is doing original animation, Zootopia, and Zootopia is the second biggest movie of the year, right behind Captain America Civil War. Now, Captain America Civil War just joined the $1 billion club, but Zootopia is awfully close. It's like 980 million something. It's really close to getting up there to the $1 billion club, which would be huge, especially because Zootopia seems like, I think at first glance, like a small movie. So that just shows how well made it is. Also, it's extremely interesting in the message that it has. It's a very, very good movie. But anyway, I think that what's happening is that audiences are moving forward significantly, and 2D animation has really been left behind. So I think while these old classics have a special place in the heart of many fans, I think they aren't quite what they used to be. Mulan, Jungle Book, Beauty and the Beast, you know, I think maybe Disney might see their rewatchability factor slipping away. So what they want to do is, like, they have their computer animation like Frozen, but also with this live action, they're able to create something new. Now, I don't know how many people are rewatching though Maleficent, Oz the Great and Powerful, even the first Alice. I don't think that's huge, actually. But I think that with the Jungle Book, they really they did something special there. I think they really had a success there. And I think that with the upcoming Beauty and the Beast that they're doing, I think it seems that that could be equally successful. I think they're really starting to get in the zone. I also bet you Cinderella does pretty well. So I think that what Disney's trying, and also these movies make just so much money. They make so much money. You know, so I think that that's also worth the effort for Disney. I mean, the reward for these is great. If you want to know when a movie studio will stop doing something, it will be when they stop making money doing it. That's what will stop it. And Disney is not anywhere near that being the case for these live action adaptations. And I'm sorry that you're bored with them, Elsie, but I do not think that audiences are bored with them just yet. And I think that's because Disney's able to not totally, you know, copy the first story, but they evolve it a little bit. Like the Jungle Book, I think, had some really nice stuff about becoming a man, what, you know, and also, you know, so often everyone always, like, when it's the environment versus mankind, it's always depicted as man being evil, right? And man messes up things for animals. But I thought that showing Mowgli as a positive influence on the earth and the jungle and the whole ecosystem was really nice. You know, it showed that he had to be responsible, that humanity has to be responsible, but I liked not being vilified for once when it came to humanity versus the rest of the globe. So that was nice. And I think that, you know, I think Beauty and the Beast is hinting at a lot of interesting sophistication. So we'll see what happens. I think that this is just, you know, trying to keep the fairy tale brand strong, and, you know, audiences so far really like it. And I think Disney's getting better and better at it. So I think it's good. You're just going to get more of them before you get less. Also, people really like fairy tales. Disney's very good at giving them what they want with the, as I said yesterday, with the fantasy, the overload. And I think that, for instance, Mulan, you mentioned Mulan. I think a lot of people would love to see an Asian-themed action-adventure movie with Mulan as the heroine done right. You know, some of this, you know, it's almost like, you know what I would actually liken it to, Elsie, and maybe this will help you understand it a little bit better. When you look at the concept art for the animated movies, you're like, wow, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you kind of like dumb it down or simplify it a little bit for the mainstream? Why wouldn't you do the beautiful artwork that I've seen here? And I think that live action allows them to bring that concept art to life as originally imagined. And I think that speaks to also an audience that's gotten, you know, everybody grew up on these animated movies, and these are almost like the adult versions for it. So I think it's very smart. I think there are a lot of reasons that the Disney live action fairy tales work, and those are a couple of them. But also, Elsie, you should be very happy. I think that they are working on original content like Zootopia, and that's doing well. In addition. All right, thank you for your question, Elsie. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please write down below, I think, today's top 3 stories and that viewer question yourself, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.